Hello and welcome. The big story tonight has been the RBI's figures on demonetization and just how much cash came back into the system after the note ban. It turns out that 99% of the demonetized currency is back in the system, which has contradicted every government claim on this so far. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley was speaking to reporters about it earlier this evening.
Some people who have an inadequate understanding of how to tackle the problem of black money were confusing the demonetization exercise merely with how much money comes back into the system and how much does not come back. That was never the real object of demonetization. The object of demonetization was that India is predominantly a high cash economy, and therefore that scenario requires to be significantly altered. We intended to give a blow to black money, and for doing that expand the tax base of the country. And this is because of the fact that those dealing in cash currency were now compelled to deposit the money in the banks, and the anonymity which existed with regard to the ownership of this cash money operating in the system has come to an end. The money has now got identified with a particular owner.
99% of the banned notes that were demonetized were returned to it. If you remember, when Prime Minister Modi banned the 500 and 1,000 rupee notes in November last year, the logic was that this would target black money, it would target terror funding, and it would target fake currency. In all, about 16 lakh crores were demonetized. That's the 500 and 1,000 rupee notes. And the government had estimated that roughly 11 lakh crores would come back into the system and that the remaining 5 lakhs would not come back. In fact, I can tell you that the then Attorney General had told the Supreme Court that the 4 or 5 lakh crores that would not come back was being used by insurgents in the northeast and Jammu and Kashmir, and that this would be neutralized. That figure is clearly not adding up here. And if that had happened, of course, it would have meant that the RBI's liability would go down. In fact, it would make money for the government. All of this has been debunked today because only 1% of that money has come back. That is about 16,000 crores. I've got Srinivasan Jain, who's been following this story very closely. My colleague Srinivasan Jain here in the studio with us. Founding editor of The Wire, M.K. Venu, here with us tonight. Mohan Guruswamy joins us from Hyderabad. Rajat Sethi of the India Foundation also joining us via Skype from Imphal. And Priyanka Chaturvedi of the Congress Party. Vasu, let's first break down these numbers. And we just heard the finance minister saying that those who've actually been criticizing this move have an inadequate understanding, as he put it, of how to tackle the issue of black money. Were you convinced by his arguments?
Well, Nidhi, it was an astonishing moving of goalposts by the finance minister, who seems to have virtually rolled back on what the Prime Minister himself outlined as the main reasons for demonetization. And even those reasons which the finance minister cited now as successes about expanding tax base and expanding digital base, we'll unpack those numbers in a second. But if you go back to the Prime Minister's famous November the 8th speech, which you referred to, where he outlined the 3 core tenets, the holy grail, as it were, of demonetization. And if you look at what has really happened with that, I mean, number one, you have 99% of the cash back, just 1% out of the system. So that essential premise that this was going to tackle black money falls right there. Now, if you look at the second point about fake currency, according to the finance minister himself, he said that since demonetization, 11.23 crore fake currency has been detected, which is only 0.0007% of all the demonetized cash.
Okay, that is actually a very startling figure. I'm just going to go back to Arun Jaitley because I think he's taking questions. Let's listen in.
The GDP. Today, when you have greater number of banking transactions, when you have a larger tax base, when you have more revenue with the center and the states, with larger ability for public spending, in the medium and the long term, all this contributes to a larger GDP.
So as you said, there will be more steps taken to curb black money, and this is just the beginning for the government. As you mentioned, there will be more steps coming. What would be these steps like? And to be precise, as you said, this has served the purpose with the fact
Can you not make out the distinction that every step that we have taken One, that every Indian must have a bank account. That was the first step. Two, government, instead of just distributing cash doles, will send all the subsidy support into the bank accounts. This was the second step. Foreign money, strict action, that is the third step. Round tripping through treaty misuse being stopped, that's the next step. Your Benami properties and the entire curb on these shell companies. Thereafter, the PAN card requirement for cash expenditure, restricting cash expenditure is a step. And then you had demonetization as a very powerful step. And subsequently now, the biggest step against black money to incentivize official transactions to claim the input benefits is the GST itself. So one after the other, if you look at the big picture, each step has been taken in the direction of squeezing the cash and formalizing the economy. There has been a consistent method on it, and whatever further steps in this direction are required, I have already announced, so I don't mind repeating it. It's no news that I am giving you. My next step is going to be to put an end to black money used in elections, and therefore how to ensure that it's tax-paid money which comes into the political system and for electioneering purposes. That's the next stage for which we are almost at the final stage of our proposals.
सर एक इशू इसमें ये कहा गया कि कोऑपरेटिव बैंक में जो पैसा जमा हुआ था और उसके अलावा जो नेपाल से है वो अभी कैलकुलेशन में नहीं आया है, तो ऐसे में 15.28 और 15.44 के बीच अंतर तो रह नहीं।
देखिए, मैं ये कैलकुलेशंस का मास्टर आरबीआई है और इसलिए इस कैलकुलेशन पे हम लोग कोई टिप्पणी करें अपने आप में उचित
बढ़
नहीं
नहीं
है।
सकता है। मेरा सवाल ये था सर कि ये जो संख्या है वो और लगता है 15.44 से भी ऊपर न पहुंच जाए।
One by one, please, one by one.
99% नोट जो लीगली एक्सचेंज हो गए, क्या डिमोनेटाइजेशन को इस ढंग से फ्रेम किया?
I think he has no understanding of the object of demonetization. He has been confusing demonetization that it was an exercise to confiscate money. Demonetization was an exercise to nudge India towards digitization, larger tax pay, to eliminate black money and to end the anonymity of cash and bring it into the system. Because he has never taken steps against black money during his own tenure, he has been confusing this battle as only as an effort for confiscation of money.
I think that's Mr. Jaitley criticizing former Finance Minister Chidambaram, who's actually tweeted shame on the RBI, which recommended demonetization, 99% notes legally exchanged. And actually, Vasu was just giving us some very important figures there. What is astonishing, actually, Venu, is that while the government says all this, and I was just reading out what the Attorney General told the Supreme Court, which is that their own estimate was that there would be 4 or 5 lakh crores that would not come back into the system. That money was being used by terrorists and insurgents in the northeast. None of that has been proven correct.
Absolutely, Nidhi. Even Finance Minister Arun Jaitley had specifically mentioned that about 3 lakh crores of the demonetized money will not come back. It will be extinguished, and RBI will use it for welfare schemes. Will be able to give it to the government as whatever profit or reserves. Now the point is, cash component of the total wealth. Black money is about 40% of India's GDP. Cash component about 5 to 6%, which works out about 3 lakh crore. Now the astonishing thing is that all the money has been pushed back into the system by businesses. These are real estate guys, whatever businesses which generate black money, and they are now still going after individuals. And Mr. Jaitley says their idea was not to confiscate money, but they still have sent notices to about 8 lakh people who have deposited money. And a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. They are saying that we are going to confiscate your money. Please explain where you got this money from. In fact, and these are all small money. If you take average, PM said that 1.75 lakh crore has come back through these individuals who returned.
In fact, gave 3 contradictory figures: 3 lakh crores, 1.75 lakh crores, and 2 lakh crores.
And Vasu, even if you just split that into the number of people to whom notices have gone, about 18 lakh people have got notices, out of which 9 lakh people, as per Finance Ministry's own admission, have said that they've paid taxes, therefore they have no obligation to the government. So now they're pursuing the remaining 8 lakh people of the 18 lakh. And their average bank account, which their money that they've returned, is some 15 lakh or 20 lakhs.
I want to quote the figures Vasu was talking about earlier as far as fake currency is concerned, because that was the other key objective. These are the RBI's own figures, ladies and gentlemen. According to the RBI's report, as far as 1,000 rupee notes are concerned, 0.0037% of those were found to be fake. And as far as 500 rupee notes were concerned, 0.00185% of those were found to be fake. Rajat Sethi of the India Foundation. Rajat, what's your first reaction to these numbers? I think the question everyone is asking is, economically, what was really the point of demonetization? Have the goalposts repeatedly changed? There was no mention of going digital, going cashless when the Prime Minister first spoke about it. That is something that came into the narrative much later. And the fact is, today we are not a cashless economy. The cash is very much back in the system. It's circulating. Now you have 2,000 rupee notes out there which are circulating en masse. Rajat, what's your first reaction to this?
Good evening, Nidhi. Thank you for having me here. 2 points to begin with. The first point is that as the finance minister, who's the policymaker, and the RBI have put forth in this report, they have clearly stated that the objective of the demonetization was clearly to bring back the stashed currency in cash back into the circulation. That's number one. The critics of this piece of data claim that all this amount of cash, 99% of cash, has been circulated back into the system. I wanted to highlight to them that the very nature of currency needs to be understood before we jump into this conclusion that demonetization was a failure. My point here is that the velocity of currency is so fierce that any small or big pore that is there in the system, the currencies will find a way out and will try to pierce into and come back into the circulation. And that is exactly what has happened. Now, what you just claimed, or I think Srinivasan was telling us that the AG was making a counterclaim early on. So I wanted to highlight that this scale of experiment of demonetization is unprecedented across the world. Even the top economists in the best of the universities and think tanks cannot comprehend the scale of this. So one needs to give them benefit of doubt that yes, they thought that there will be a certain amount of currency which people would be holding and might not be able to turn it back. But I think in hindsight, they would have also realized that no matter what format of currency is, right now they need to chase the transactions. All the transactions which were made to convert these currencies from cash into circulation needs to be checked. And that is where the intelligence of our revenue collection system would be tested. And I wanted to make a final point that there have been huge amount of notices which have gone out, and it will take certain number of months and years to actually go through these transactions and figure out what are these legitimate sources or if these are illegitimate sources. So I think the decision.
Yeah, but Rajat, you're saying that let's give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, the Attorney General made a statement in the Supreme Court of India, no less. Mohan Guruswamy, is it that this was just such an unprecedented exercise taken on such a huge scale that is why a lot of things are not adding up? Do you buy Arun Jaitley's argument that this was about expanding the tax base? And I'm going to come to Vasu for those figures as well in just a bit. But do you buy into that argument that this was about the tax base, this was about digitizing the economy?
Nidhi, it was without any doubt unprecedented. It's an unprecedented act of vandalism. The economy was just beginning to pick up. It was beginning to pick up speed. And when they inflicted this blow on it in November, I said that very night that this was doomed to fail. And it's failed. Because they said that 4 lakh crores will be lying back and the RBI will get that bonus. That didn't happen. Black money is back in circulation. Real estate transactions are taking place. People are buying gold. All kinds of things are happening. And nothing, and tax, Jaitley's big thing was that tax returns have gone up. Matter of fact, returns have slowed down. The previous year it was 27%. This year it's 23%. So what is he talking about? And when in January he said tax revenues have gone up, he quietly added the pay commission arrears on which taxes were deducted and said that revenues have gone up for the quarter. But the quarter was, from September. So, they're fudging figures, they're playing ducks and drakes with figures. The problem with this government now is not, he has accused us of being unable to see an inadequate understanding of the big picture, he says. I think he has an inadequate understanding of facts and the truth. And they keep thinking that they can, distort data, they can keep misinterpreting things and keep telling half-truths and get away with it. You saw that again today. A bunch of half-truths and convenient truths. They never put the big picture in front of you. Point is, there's a big blunder, it's a total failure. You haven't got the economy going. Digitization is back to pre-November levels. All that has happened, but they will not admit it.
Yeah, Basu just wants to comment on that.
Obviously, you don't expect them to admit it.
That the finance minister was asked about the Attorney General's claims in the Supreme Court and he called it a speculative statement. Something the Attorney General at that time said to the Supreme Court of India.
This sounds like the other justification where they said it was just banter, that what was said in court is just banter. But I just want to go back to a couple of points. To the point about the fact that a certain amount of scrutiny is now already going on with the money that is coming to the system. The single biggest exercise of tax raids has been conducted in the months after demonetization. We have never seen that kind of activity in recent history. What has that yielded? The total value of seizures of undisclosed income detected after demonetization, according to the CBDT, is 18,529 crores, which is 1.2% of the entire amount that is demonetized. In addition to this, millions and millions of these suspicious transactions will now be monitored, which could take years and years before we actually yield any tangible results. Let's look at the claims about the tax base, which Mr. Guruswamy also mentioned, and let's look at some of the actual figures. If you put it in perspective, if you look at previous years, for example, you'll find that again the numbers simply don't add up. For example, as he mentioned, the 25% figure, that the number of individuals who file tax returns have gone up from about 2.23 crores returns last year to 2.8 crores this year, which is a rise of 25%. But if you look at previous years, it was 15% in financial year 2015, but in financial year 2016, it was a 27% jump. So in the year before demonetization, the tax base was rising at a higher rate than in the financial year of demonetization. So that's just one example of a host of numbers. We've been putting out these numbers continuously, which show that even the changed goalposts, Nidhi, the changed goalposts
are not making sense, are not adding up.
Of an increasing tax base, of moving towards digitization, are not adding up as well.
And there's April data from RBI which says digital transactions have gone down 27%.
That's what I was coming to. Guruswamy said that it's gone back to the pre-demonetization levels. We have Lord Meghnad Desai on the phone line with us, as of course a professor of economics. Lord Desai, what are your first thoughts on these numbers today? You've generally been supportive of the demonetization exercise. What do you think now?
Well, I haven't actually seen the numbers because I'm in an airport for the last 3 hours. It says all it says is that the people are clever people and they got rid of it by buying things. And whoever they bought things from returned the money to the exchequer or to the... So, I mean, what it is, the government may have expected to devalorize some proportion of black money, and that didn't succeed. That's fine. But in the process, we have got out of the habit of Benami transactions, and from now on, large-scale cash transactions are not allowed. So we are moving to a much more a transparent taxable system, which is a good thing.
You don't need demonetization to necessarily move away towards a system of either Benami transactions or less cash transactions. You can do that without demonetization.
It would not happen. You need a shock of demonetization to change behavior.
But it hasn't changed behavior. I mean, Rajat Sethi, it hasn't changed behavior. We're back to the digitization levels pre the note ban. So people are, again, like I said in the beginning, cash is circulating pretty freely out there. And as Vasu just read out the figures, the tax base has jumped in the past as well. It's not necessarily linked to demonetization. The amount of fake currency that has been detected is such a minuscule amount, which brings us back to the question. I mean, our GDP has taken a hit, the economy has taken a hit. There was, I think, some 10 million jobs, according to one statistic, that was lost during this period of just post demonetization.
Actually, I think it was the CMI report said 1.5 million jobs lost in
that specific period, and they've actually warned that this effect is going to go on for a while. So Rajat Sethi, was the pain worth it? Politically, it seems to have paid off and done really well for the BJP, but was it economically worth it?
Okay, so let's not add all these issues, because once you start adding up, I'll have to answer them one by one. First thing that you talked about cash. Now, there is an article on the NDTV website itself which quotes the RBI data, says that cash in circulation has declined by 20%. And what I need to check here is that how sustainable this cash decline is, because this is the data which is quoted on the March 31st by the RBI. Now, as Lord Meghnath Desai was also mentioning, an external shock does change the behavior. Every time a person starts holding money, there is a perceptible threat that there can be some follow-up actions. As you would know, recently, Income Tax Department has been publishing advertisements in newspapers that you are not allowed to carry more than 2 lakh rupees of cash from multiple sources in a single day. That's a big thing. And there are other certain provisions that you cannot even start disbursing cash of more than 10,000 rupees when you're paying services. So all these are checks.
None of the goals that were meant to be the stated aim of this exercise appear to have at least been met when you tear apart the figures. But politically, smart move, right? Because it has totally benefited the Prime Minister and his image of being a pro-poor messiah.
See, Nidhi, the problem is, in terms of the perception game, the Prime Minister successfully sold the idea that he was punishing the rich. But now with the 99% of the money coming back, it's very obvious that the rich have managed to push the cash back. And now we hear that it will take a year or 2 years and painstaking this thing by investigated by Income Tax Department, whose integrity is always in question. Now, I don't know how all the money will come back. And Nidhi, one fundamental point which nobody is talking about. Cash was only about 6% of the black wealth. What about the remaining 94%, which is constituted by real estate and gold? You have not even started touching that. We are told that they are using the Binami Act to touch that. Now, the whole thing is happening in a rather chaotic way, and in a manner that is actually hurting the economy. So
also this whole idea, which we have now heard from on the panel several times, that there's been some kind of shift in behavior. Now, firstly, that's not quantifiable, that's anecdotal, right? The numbers that suggest that demonetization has not worked are quantifiable. But even if you were to look at it anecdotally, if you just take, for example, the recent by-election we had in Chennai, the RK Nagar bypoll in April, 200 crores of black cash of new currency was recovered. Now, we know that elections are a big source of spending of black cash. So, were there to be any change in behavior, where has that 200 crores come from? So, where even at the anecdotal level is some evidence of a huge behavioral shift?
And how many political parties declared their cash, returned cash to the bank?
Well, as Arun Jaitley says, he says that election reform is going to is his next target. Interesting. I think we'll be looking at these.
Supposed to be the primary target. Now it's become the next target.
The GDP numbers are out tomorrow. The core sector numbers are out tomorrow again for the next quarter. So I think tomorrow is going to be interesting as well, as we look at the continued fallout of demonetization on the economy. I have to leave it there. I'll take a break. Thank you very much to our panelists for joining us at the very last minute today.